Jungkook was supposed to have his second checkup that day. The first was when he found out about his pregnancy, and of course, he went to the doctor alone. He couldn't tell anyone about it, so secretly going on checkups was his only choice. He wasn't expecting his husband to accompany him now, but when he left his room, Taehyung appeared to have been waiting for him to come out. The older was sitting on the couch, his phone in his hand and his eyes focused on it. Jungkook snatched his attention when he came out, and Taehyung immediately stood up, pocketing his phone and walking towards him. "Ready to go?" the older asked, hand circling his waist. Jungkook felt his face blush, and he couldn't even hide it from the man, considering how their faces were almost only an inch away from each other. He nodded his head slowly, a tiny smile itching its way to his lips, but he prevented it from showing. Too bad that his eyes were already glowing and Taehyung could see it. Taehyung drove while Jungkook stayed quiet. He was nervous about the checkup because what if the baby wasn't healthy? What if he hadn't been careful enough and it has only been a few months? What if he wasn't fit to be a mother? What if he still wasn't ready? Jungkook could feel his hands getting cold, so he clutched them with the other, gulping every other minute as his thoughts clouded his mind. This hadn't gone unnoticed by his husband, who frequently sneaked a peek at him. "You don't have to worry. You aren't doing risky stuff to harm the baby's health," Taehyung ensured, as if he could read Jungkook's mind, gripping at the younger's cold hand using his unoccupied hand afterward. Just like that, Jungkook's nervousness was gone. Because now, he had Taehyung. Contrary to what Jungkook has been worrying about, the baby was perfectly healthy. His unfortunate little accident the week before didn't do any harm to the baby in his womb, and that news enlightened them both. They showed them the forming fetus through the machine, and the younger almost cried from just how it looked. It wasn't even formed yet, but it was already beautiful, and Taehyung could say the same. They weren't so busy, but Jungkook was getting tired, so they went home straight after that. They expected to have some rest when they get home, but when they opened the door, they knew they wouldn't get some in the meantime. Because instead of the maids greeting them, the grinning face of Taehyung's mom welcomed them. "Welcome home, sweeties." She kissed their cheeks quickly before pulling them inside. "What are you doing here?" Taehyung asked, forehead creasing in curiosity. "Just visiting my son-in-law, who was surprisingly pregnant." "I wonder why no one told us this important news," his mom replied, rolling her eyes at him while his husband giggled at them. "How dare you not tell me that I'm gonna be a grandmother soon? Don't you know how excited I am right now?" The day didn't go smoothly for Taehyung after that. Thankfully, his father wasn't there with his mom because he had something else to do, but his mom was the real headache though, asking and saying nonsense stuff and blabbering too much information about pregnancy. Like when she almost scared the hell out of Jungkook when she said that giving birth was painful. Or when it was Taehyung who got afraid when she said how pregnant people get so emotional, and frequently look for sexual attention, or feel. In other words, they could be of help, but not for now, not ever actually, Taehyung thought. She told them some tips about handling the pregnancy, and Jungkook was thankful for having her. She was the mother that he needed right now. Too bad his real parents didn't get the chance to meet their grandchild, but he was sure they were happy for him somewhere. When Taehyung's mother left, the two were already docked down on the couch. Jungkook didn't know what to do, laugh at how funny Taehyung's mother was, or grin widely because of how happy he felt. He looked at Taehyung to see his reaction to the sudden visit, but he was already looking at him, a small smile lying on his lips. Jungkook immediately felt his cheeks warming and he knew he was blushing in front of his husband, who was the cause of all the butterflies roaming inside his stomach. "I'm sorry for being a jerk before," was the first thing Taehyung said. Jungkook was not expecting that, but he was happy. He was glad that the older was sorry. Jungkook didn't really need a spoken apology from him, because his past actions were showing how much he cared for them now, but the younger also didn't know that receiving one from him could lighten the heavy feeling he had in his chest. It was like he could finally believe that Taehyung finally truly accepted their baby. Those words were so simple that someone hearing them would probably think that it was a plain thing. But for Jungkook, it was not. It was his first time hearing those words from Taehyung and it meant so much to him. Jungkook felt his eyes glistening and suddenly, flowers were blooming inside his chest once again. Those simple words brought back the adoration he once had for him, the adoration that never really left but was buried deep inside his head. Doubts were suddenly lifted from his mind and tears fell from his eyes. Taehyung was obviously surprised to see this. He wasn't really thinking when he said his apology, it just happened. His husband's white smile triggered memories of him being a jerk to Jungkook, and suddenly, his lips were already moving, saying things that he has always wanted to say but couldn't due to his ego. He was happy and proud of himself at first, but then he saw Jungkook's glassy eyes. He thought he said something wrong, which offended the younger, so he was about to apologize again, but then tears fell from Jungkook's eyes. It seems like his body had a mind of its own, when his hands suddenly reached for Jungkook's face, wiping the tears away from his cheeks, and pulling him into a hug before kissing his forehead. He was surprised at his own actions. He didn't see himself doing sweet stuff like this to anyone, but here he was. What surprised him more, though, was the fact that he was satisfied. He was happy to finally have his husband's warmth against him. He felt Jungkook tremble from too much crying, but he didn't say anything. In fact, Jungkook was the one who cut the silence by saying something that Taehyung wasn't expecting at that very moment. "Thank you." Yes, he was satisfied this way. Nobody knew about it. Taehyung seemed to be the type of person to not trust others. He did not rely on others and only believe in himself, so nobody thought of it. Ask his employees who Taehyung entrusted his life with and they will answer his own name, Kim Taehyung, because he only believes in himself. Nobody suspected it, let alone think that he had someone he entrusted himself with, someone he entrusted his company with, and his decisions with. But he has. This trusted person was named Kim Namjoon, Taehyung's cousin, who was only a year older than him, but has so much experience when it comes to companies due to his father letting him take over their own company when he was just 16. Years of hard work paid off for him, and now he has more than 3 different kinds of businesses with lots of branches around the world. Taehyung looked up to him like a big brother and a role model at the same time. Namjoon didn't usually come over to his place since he himself was a busy person, but when he did, Taehyung gave him every last bit of his attention. Let's say Taehyung kinda has an obsession, and that was striving hard to become just as successful as this Namjoon guy, or even more than him. They barely talked about their personal lives though, because Taehyung insisted not to. You see, Namjoon always had a wonderful life. Loved by both of his parents, by the people he worked with, by girls, by children, and even by animals. Even his own father loved Namjoon, and maybe he was a little envious of it, but he never looked at him with rage or resentment. The guy didn't do wrong to him. Instead, he was shown beautiful deeds. Namjoon was known for being a nice guy, the main reason why everybody admired him, himself included. But there was something he hated about this guy. He was always smiling. Those crinkles by his eyes, and dimples on his cheeks when he smiled. He hated that he was always happy, as if he had never encountered any problem in his life. He was annoyed by that thought. But other than that, the man was perfect. So he should at least feel glad when this cousin guy visited him at his house early in the evening, since it has been almost a year since they last saw each other. His smile when he saw Namjoon's face needed only a second to form, but the tug on his lips immediately disappeared when it was Jungkook's voice that he first heard. Namjoon Hyung, his head almost broke from how fast he turned to look at his husband's face when he shouted, his voice laced with mixed excitement and surprise. Hyung's eyebrow raised in suspicion when he saw the wide grin in Jungkook's mouth, but what confused him more was the same wide grin on Namjoon's lips. Namjoon was fast to pull Jungkook in a hug, but Hyung was faster when he pulled his husband back to him and threw a glare at his cousin. Whoa. Relax, dude. I'm not gonna steal him from you. Namjoon laughed, causing Jungkook to laugh as well. Hyung was an inch close to being annoyed, but he calmed himself. You two know each other, he asked, voice devoid of feelings but filled with coldness. The two were confused at his sudden behavior, but smiled at each other again, before nodding their heads in unison. I used to work part-time in his cafe when I was still in school. He usually visited the main branch, so we kinda got the chance to know each other better. He's such a nice boss and I like him very much, Jungkook replied, oblivious about the wrong thought that he had planted into his husband's mind. He likes him, Hyung thought, and he swore he heard the bitter tone of his voice inside his head talking to himself, but he didn't care because right now, all he was thinking about was how his husband liked another man, and that man just had to be his cousin. Great, just great.